Okay, welcome back to the Shared Practices podcast. This is another pre-ownership flashback where we are preparing for our next season. We're preparing for season 4 that we're going to do on case acceptance. But in the meantime, we're bringing on some people who are either an update in their journey on ownership or they have a different perspective. And this is Dr. Dawn Baker this week. I'm really excited for this interview. And I know you've already listened, George, but kind of an amazing story coming up here.
Yeah, I remember it's like the person you would least expect to have as awesome. You know what I mean? I just as she's talking, I don't think you're expecting how awesome she is until you've kind of heard it. You know what I mean? She has such a fantastic perspective, and I remember thinking 4 or 5 times, where did Richard find this? This awesome guest. I was just very, very impressed.
It was actually funny. We did a pre-phone call, and she revealed some things. I apologize on the episode. There's some things that she has to edit for legal reasons that she can't share the full depth of the story because she's had to let people go, and there's HR ramifications, and she just didn't feel comfortable sharing it. But we did this pre-call, and I sat there and took 4 massive sticky notes, not like the regular sticky notes, 4 massive sticky notes of nonstop notes. And she can talk fast and has story after story after story. And then it just kept getting better. There was her journey, and then the leadership transformation that she's had, and her work ethic, all these different things came together. And I was like, this is going to be good. So I guess we should just let the interview speak for itself instead of talking about it. So let's talk with Dr. Dawn Baker. Okay, hello. Today I have with us Dr. Dawn Baker. Dawn, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Doing so good. I am really excited for this interview. You were on, I'm trying to think which Facebook group it was. It must have been either the Business of Dentistry or the Nachos group. I don't know which group it was, but someone had posted about practice ownership and how they were trying to convince, I think their mom or their mother-in-law about whether they should buy a practice or stay an associate and pay down debt. And you jumped on there and offered some advice and your perspective. And I was like, this lady has an awesome story I can tell. And I really wanted to hear more from you. So we chatted yesterday at lunch, and I literally sat there and scribbled down notes of all the things that you've both been through and done and where you are now and how you got there. I think you have an awesome journey, and I think our audience will really, really enjoy it. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is an absolute pleasure. My journey has been a roller coaster. We've had highs of highs and lows of lows and everything in between. It started out, I graduated in 2009.
Okay.
I guess it starts before that. I was working in a practice.
Well, actually, you mentioned that you had a previous career. I think that adds things to people's perspective, versus going straight from high school to college to dental school to dentistry. You mentioned that yesterday. I didn't get to ask a little bit more about it. So tell us where you came from before dental school and dentistry.
Yeah, so the short story is I fell off my horse. Literally, I was life flighted, and during that journey, I decided I wanted to be a dentist. It's an odd way to get there. So I switched my career from elementary education to dentistry. So what better way to get to know dentistry than to get a job? So put my application out there, and I found someone willing to hire me as an experienced dental assistant. So I did that while I was doing all my prereqs.
Nice.
And started off, all in. Didn't know what mesial was, but I was going to figure it out.
Yeah.
So from there, I moved on, and I continued assisting at an office that had kind of off hours. So I would assist in the evenings and on the weekends, and eventually gained my EFTA license. Was that
in undergrad or during dental school? When did you actually become an EFTA?
So during dental school, so any dental school students out there, you can kind of bypass the system. I didn't have to take the EFTA course because dental school is an EFTA course.
Yeah.
and then some. And so I was able to, in Ohio, bypass that system and just take the exam, and then got my license. And so during the day, I would pay tuition to put people's fillings in, and during the evening, I would get paid to put people's fillings in. So it was a tremendous experience.
I mean, it's so funny to me because I feel like in dental school, you know, everyone's really slow and they're new and they're like trying to figure things out. Like I can imagine that in one evening of work, you did like as much dentistry as most dental students do in like an entire week of dental school.
It's true. One of the frustrations I ran into was the inefficiencies. So I would try to double book myself in clinic, and they would not let me. It wouldn't fly.
You're like, no, this is how you do it, you guys. You just get the patients in and you double book. That's what you do.
Dumb one, drill another. It's fine. No, they wouldn't go for it. So
it's funny because we have EFTAs in the Army, and I feel really lazy whenever I'm working with an EFTA. I just like get someone numb and put a hole in their tooth and I walk away. And it's so weird. Like I feel like I'm like just leaving all the hard work. Like I think the hard work is getting that matrix band on, getting the wedge, getting everything sealed, getting everything like contoured, and then building it up and getting the occlusion right and getting the anatomy looking decent, and then adjusting it for the patient, all of that. And then something, and we're doing a lot of amalgam in the Army. So then like some marginal ridge breaks and you got to do it again. And so I hats off to EFTAs everywhere. And the fact that you did that in dental school, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So were you able to like, were you supporting yourself? Like, you know, what was the drive to have your EFTA job while you were in dental school? Because most people are just satisfied, like, oh, I'll just go more into debt and you know, move forward.
Yeah. So, you know, my journey was a little. I'm a very motivated person, so I wanted to know. I wanted to be better. I was also financially driven. My only parent passed away when I was in my first year of dental school. So I was in a little different financial situation than many are. And so I knew I was going to either sink or swim. So I went swimming.
So this was kind of you supporting yourself. You were kind of your only source of both income and emotional support and like just powering through. Yeah,
it was great. And it was good to have a support system. You know, you become friends with your coworkers, and it was a family, you know, away from the craziness of dental school, which was great.
Well, and the other funny thing is that, like, I bet the perspective also helped. So that I know Alan Mead talks about this on the Dental Hacks, where he talks about people who are married and have kids tended to be a little bit more balanced in their perspective of like when something goes wrong in dental school. He always talks about how like, oh, well, if you've got this outside support and network and perspective, it doesn't feel like your entire world is collapsing. So I bet it was kind of the same thing where it's like, you know what real dentistry looks like. So it's like if you got an A- or a B or whatever on some practical, it's not the end of the world.
Absolutely. The other trick was I would be at work and I would have to make a temporary with ProTemp, and then I would have to go to dental school and make a temporary with Jet.
Right. Okay. So you're like,
so, you know, you
knew what was out there, what was possible.
Yeah, I learned all the materials. It was great.
That's awesome. So then at what point in dental school, you know, did you think, okay, I'll go be an associate, I'll go, you know, do I need a residency? You know, what was your decision making at the end of dental school as to AEGD or GPR versus no, versus just getting out, versus trying to be an owner sooner versus later? What were you thinking?
Because at the time of graduation, I had about 5 years of private practice experience. I was ready to do it. So I decided to skip doing any postdoc work and going straight into private practice.
Sure.
Hindsight, if I had to do it again, I probably would do a residency that does some exciting procedures. Maybe not ones that I want to do for a career, but for exposure. But I'm still happy with my decision. I jumped into being an associate. I had some associateships that were awesome, great mentors. I had some that were your typical nightmares. I worked part-time for several different offices. So I got to see how different offices functioned, different insurances, different philosophies,
sure,
and different mentors, which was phenomenal. I still have them as mentors, which is great. And then I knew I wanted to head into ownership. I was in a private practice that was mostly fee for service. Considered going into a buy-in, but then my youngest son, who was an infant, was diagnosed with pediatric cancer and got very sick. At that time, when he turned about 7 months old, he coded from septic shock.
Oh my goodness.
Post chemo. And so I decided at that very moment, it's time to take a break. I was a workaholic, 3 kids at home, a husband that works full time. And I decided it's time for me to just stop for a minute. So, at that time I took probably 10 months off.
Okay.
And took care of my kiddo. He's doing great. He just turned 4. And then I started exploring going back into the world. So my perspective at this point as a mom and as a professional, I wanted freedom. I wanted that freedom to be able to dictate what type of dentistry we do, what type of patients we work on, how we get compensated, when we're open, when we're closed. And I knew that would be a challenge as an associate.
Okay.
And I knew I had the skill set. I was ready to be a leader as an ownership. So I started looking for opportunities, as many of us have. And, there's a lot of dead ends out there looking for the right space, but it's too much or it's not enough space or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Came across a unique situation with
and actually, hey, do you mind if I cut you off just here for a second?
Yeah.
So one of the questions, and I apologize for being super abrupt. This is
you're good. You're good.
The Facebook post. One of his concerns was like the length of time that he had practiced, and so I wanted to ask you. We have a bunch of people who on our show, like we tend to get these outliers that like open practices straight out of school, and that we know that's like 1 out of every dental school class or 2 out of every dental school class. It's not the typical. So you had a little bit longer of a journey. You had like 6 years. So, but you had that EFTA experience under your belt. So I would think you were even clinically maybe ahead of the curve, and maybe business wise or otherwise. I think, did you say you did like front desk stuff too in dental school?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
So you had a lot under your belt, but you weren't, for whatever reason, at the point where you were ready to go into practice. How do you feel about that length of time that you were an associate? Do you feel like you could have done your own practice sooner, like a few years sooner, or do you feel like that was the time and space that you needed?
I liked where I was.
Okay.
I would have, at 4 years out, I think I was ready.
Okay.
I just didn't find the opportunity.
Sure.
So I think at that time, but for the first few years, just building up that confidence, learning how to deal with staff issues, learning how to get exposed to different materials. I loved working in multiple offices, so I used a different bond in every office. So I could see the failure rates. I could see sensitivities and things like that. So, if I had to do it over again, I still wouldn't go straight into ownership. I think there's a huge value in working for somebody else and letting them guide you and mentor you.
Cool. And that's exactly the perspective I want, because I feel like we overhype on this show early ownership. And I think there really is true value to that experience of just getting to settle into dentistry, just feeling it out and trying it out and getting that battened down and ready to go before you go into that whole other side of leadership and practice ownership. So I wanted to hear your little nuggets of wisdom, and that's exactly what we wanted. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So then you decide, okay, you're coming back to work after your son's battle with cancer. Like, how did you find this practice? Like, what were you doing to try and find a practice? Like, what feelers were you putting out there to find something?
So I put a little bit of karma out there, I think, which is what really worked for me. But I started by finding a really good dental commercial realtor who helps you negotiate spaces. He was not the person who found me the practice in the end, but he was a great resource along the way. I also signed up.
Do you mind sharing his name? Is he local to Ohio?
He is local to Columbus, Ohio. His name is Mike.Zaller.
Mike.Zaller. Okay, we'll see if we can get his contact info and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, so he's great. Then I reached, I'd previously registered with a company called Practice Impact.
Okay.
They're a practice transition company. And they ultimately had a listing for a tiny little practice 6 miles from my home. The practice had no technology in it, not one computer, had an answering machine.
Nice.
Which I forgot how to use. And not even a typewriter either.
What?
Yeah, so it was no technology, and it had about 150 active patients, which was declining. And so I came in and I looked at it. It was fairly clean, completely outdated, but it was plumbed. Hey, let's do it.
It was a dental office, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, plumbing is a huge expense when you're looking at a startup. So I thought, okay, well, there's one less expense I have. And I even thought to myself, I can work like this for a while and then update down the road. So explored it. I was the right fit for him, and he was the right fit for me. And so we did a transition, and the chairs he had were from 1950, which was the original chairs he purchased the practice from, who bought them new in their career. So it was 2 careers ago.
Wow. Holy cow.
It looked like a robot. It was belt driven, converted to air compressed.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't know how to get it to lean backwards. So I decided, this thing's got to go. So, and as you can imagine, everything snowballs. If the chair's going to go, you might as well put new floors in. If you're going to put new floors in, you might as well move the walls around the way you want to. If you're going to move the walls around, you might as well change the countertops and the way the front desk is.
Sure.
So one thing led to the other. We wound up doing a complete gut. I don't think there's anything original left. I went to IKEA. I am an IKEA dentist. Found a lot of great cabinets that would work for me, and I have everything plumbed through the chair, so saved me a lot of money there.
Did you I don't know if you were on Dental Town much at all. Did you ever see, I feel like there's like threads talking about like IKEA furniture within a dental office specifically, not like the countertops and the systems that they have. Did you get that from Dental Town, or was that on your own?
It's on my own. We've redone kitchens, and the cabinets have held up so well, and they slide and glide and have soft close.
Nice.
I'm a little IKEA addicted. So, so it worked out really. Actually, this is my dirty little secret. My 12 o'clock countertops are IKEA's children's dresser drawers. It's in like a lime green, because that's what our colors are: deep purple and lime green. So I have 4 ops, and I have 4 kids cabinets in my ops. Nobody knows. No, just you guys. Now my secret's out.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So and I had custom tops made for them, and they look fantastic, and they uphold great, and it's IKEA. So if something breaks, I just buy the part and replace it. So
that's awesome. Cause like cabinetry within dentistry is like some ridiculous upcharge that you can go nuts. You can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on stuff that you can't tell between that and the IKEA. Maybe you can if you're looking really close, but it works. It does what you need it to do. It
does. So typical 12 o'clock dentistry cabinetry is usually anywhere from 4 to 10,000, depending on how elaborate you are.
Yeah.
I paid $80. So and a custom top, which was probably another 100. So
sure.
Yeah, and it's great. It's got more space probably than the typical cabinets does. So, unfortunately, they discontinued that cabinet, so that's a little problem.
Dang it.
Yeah, you can't win everything.
First, a word from our sponsor, Q Optics. Does anyone remember the case from the iPhone 3? I think it was 3S or 3G, whatever it was. And then also the old Galaxy S, Samsung Galaxy S. They were thick, bulky, black cases, and they weighed a little bit more, and they weren't so sleek. When I look around at a lot of loops, that's what I see. I see these big, bulky cases holding the optics. And actually, when you look through the loops, you get a little frame. As you look through the little telescopes, you can see this black outline. And you get used to it. It's normal because you're using them all the time. But I never realized how much that frame took up until I tried on one of the pairs of Q Optics prismatic loops. I remember we were at Buca di Beppo, the Italian restaurant where they had given their presentation, and I put on the frame, and all I could see was these 2 perfect little circles of magnification without a black circle or an outline surrounding the optics. I could just see around the long telescopes without those taking up another portion of my field of view. Q Optics has taken a solid titanium unibody case with a carbon shroud encircling the lenses, and they've made it smaller, more lightweight, less in the way. If you're sick of wearing loops around that look like they have a iPhone 3 case on them, that look kind of dorky, and you want something that actually looks good and allows you to see around it, you should try out Q Optics. Give them an email at sales@q-optics.com. Use the promo code SP16 for $100 off your pair of loops or $300 off your loops and light combo. If you upgrade your smartphone when they come out with a better looking, better functioning, more lightweight version, why wouldn't you do the same with your loops? Q Optics, making better loops. Tell me a little bit more about this practice. So how many patients, like what area was it in? Like, was it in a big town, small town? You said it was from your hometown?
No, so we're actually in Gahanna, which is a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. So we're very metro, very oversaturated because I am a graduate from Ohio State University, just like every other dentist.
Sure.
That's within 5-mile radius.
Okay.
And so very oversaturated. I believe the numbers came back, I want to say 1 to 1,200 or something like that.
A little bit of an uphill battle.
Yeah, a little bit. So came roaring in, tore everything apart, set it up real pretty, hired some staff, and said, let's do this. And I did start with a marketing campaign with a company that I was not satisfied with, but it did get some people in the door.
So let me ask you another question here. How many patients were in this practice?
There was somewhere between 150 to 200 total.
So that's why you were looking at this as like a comparison to a startup, because it was essentially like a shell space and a few charts and an opportunity to grow this from nothing to what you want it to be.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the term for it is a jump start. Yeah, and if I had to do it all over again, I would do a jump start again, for sure.
So how much, if you don't mind me asking, how much did you pay for the practice? Like, what was it collecting and what did you pay for it?
So it was collecting about $160,000 to $170,000 a year for the last 3 years. And I paid $50,000 for it. Steal.
That's awesome. So you can't buy a space for that much if you're going to do a startup. But then you did renovate it. So how much was the renovations? Did that put you back?
So renovations were about $200,000. So that was including 3 dental chairs, a piano, all the digital X-rays, computers. There's not one computer in the place. Really, the whole gut. So, and we have about 1,500 square feet. So you ended up, you still put some money into it, but when all is said and done, $250,000 for a startup is pretty phenomenal. Yeah. For sure.
So that kind of for you, did it feel like a very low risk situation?
It felt safer.
Yeah.
It felt safer for 2 reasons. One, that loan is a little bit lower. And 2, there's automatic income coming in a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
From a couple profies.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, you told me a story about when you first came in and you were trying to like see the first patient out financially. Like what went on there?
So I got the keys Monday. Patients rolled in. I kept the hygienist on board, and the patient decided she was going to pay me half of whatever the fee was that day, and so she handed me $60. And I looked at her, and I said, "Give me a couple minutes." So I text a picture of the money on the counter to my accountant, and I said, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And he said, "Write her a receipt." And I said, "On a sticky note." So that's the day I learned about receipt books. I had to go find one in a drawer somewhere. And then I had to make a ledger card. I don't know if you guys know what those are, but a ledger card is old school accounting. So I got to work off of ledger cards for 2 months until I got my first computer in here.
Oh, that's 2 months of like hand tracking your finances and each patient interaction.
You guys should have seen my end of day production was on one of those large sticky notes.
Nice.
It was all handwritten out. It was great.
That's awesome. So it really was a lot of bootstrapping. When we talk about like buying small practices on our show, we talk about one of the difficulties is that with a very small practice, you don't have a lot of systems in place. Like it's just the people and what's in their heads and how they've been doing things, but it's not like, that they could just walk away and we have the system here and it's clearly outlined and it's an efficient machine. So you had to build some of these systems yourself, it sounds like.
I did. I still am 2 years in and I'm still systeming left and right.
Okay.
we're not there yet. I feel like I've reinvented the wheel a little bit instead of rebounding and resourcing off of other people. So, but yeah, you start with day one, just make it to the end of the day and try to get the claims out. I had to deal with every claim by hand.
Oh, that's awful.
It took me the hour during the Profi. It took me an entire hour to get that claim finished. So it was real good, equal timing. So it was a huge learning curve. And then in the beginning, I stayed here. New practice comes new dedication, and I was here probably somewhere between 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. every night, almost every single night for the first, I don't know, maybe 5 months or so.
Okay.
It was brutal.
Yeah, that's like the dark days that you're kind of glad you're past, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So speaking of dark days, you asked me to not share any specifics, but you had some interesting early hires. It sounded like you kept on your hygienist and then you brought on some people. So I'm going to make up a scenario. We can totally edit this out because this is podcast. It's not live. But this is not what happened, but this is like, in my mind, an equivalent. You hired some people and then later on you found out that you accidentally hired a stripper, an ex-convict, and a hygienist with bad halitosis that doesn't care about hygiene.
Pretty much.
Is that fair? It's not, the details have been changed, but the level of severity is kind of close.
Oh, so bad. So bad. Yeah. Yeah. So really, background checks. That was one of my very first learning errors. Background checks matter.
So you hired some people. How soon was it an issue? Like when was it that you hired these people? You brought them on and then you realized, oh crap, I hired the wrong people.
So the hygienist came with the practice, and she had been here for better of 30 years. So off and on. So she was the mother of the practice. She was also became the mother of me, and made the decisions, which wasn't terrible, but it was a little challenging.
Sure.
And then as we got close, as we got our computers in, I decided to hire an assistant who could work front desk as well. And I got her in. And the first thing she said to me was, I don't know anything about open dental. And I said, me either.
So, and why had you picked open dental? Had you heard of it before? Where did you hear about it? And why were you like, okay, let's just do this?
So I used it as an associate. So I never used it from the insurance side. I always used it as a doctor. And it was great, and it's affordable, and I love the versatility of it. Cool. I love how flexible it is. So I knew it was the right platform for us to start off of. But I didn't know how to put insurance claims in. I didn't know any of that stuff. So I had a panic moment, and I thought, oh my God, we're in trouble. So I reached out, and one of the people I interviewed had experience with open dental. So I hired her in a panic, and got her in, and she knew open dental enough to survive. So there we go. I had 3 employees. Okay.
How long did it take to realize that, maybe God, I should have hired someone else?
Yeah. So, we had some legal issues pop up,
sure.
Which led to a dismissal, which led to discovery of very other personal legal matters.
Yeah.
And it was about 2 months.
Okay.
Which led me to find one of my favorite employees ever.
Okay.
So I kind of cleaned the slate. We went from 3 employees to no employees pretty quick.
Wow. Okay. So now are you panicking at this point because you have no one in the office with you?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I can imagine.
I had some sub hygienists, so the hygiene part was fine. I knew I could run front desk. I didn't have a lot to do on restorative side, so I wasn't too panicked yet. So I reached out to my neighbor who just got his green card, and he's a fellow from the UK.
Okay.
And he became, I said, hey, can you just if I give you $10 an hour, can you come answer the phones? That's all I need you to do is just answer the phones.
Yeah.
And he said, well, sure.
In a British accent, of course.
Of course. And so he came in with the intention to just do that, and he was going to get a job in the water industry.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, while you're job hunting, just come answer the phones for me.
Yeah.
So I felt bad paying him $10 an hour, so I bumped him up.
Yeah.
And then we interviewed, and I got an assistant on board, and then a hygienist came to me who used to be a consultant. So if you ever have a consultant hygienist, hire her or him, whatever they ask to pay them. She's been such a huge contributor to our practice.
So how did that work? How did you land someone who was a consultant and now wanted to go back to hygiene?
Good karma. That karma's on my I'll tell you. So she pulled into my office during the construction phase and tried to sell me a consultant plan.
Package. Okay, yeah.
For $60,000, they were going to help me increase my production to 180,000, increase it by 180,000. But I was at zero.
Right.
So see that as being a strong effort. So I told her that I didn't want to give her my pie and that I appreciate her time. She asked me some hard questions like, what do you do if you fail? And apparently, I don't recall this, but she tells me my answer was, I don't have time for that. So my answer is her to me, and she said, hey, if you ever need a wet-handed hygienist, I'll come be your hygienist.
Nice.
So then when my, at the time, hygienist things were going downhill, she jumped in, said, let me take the place. This is how we're going to do it, and it's going to be great. And so I was a good karma. And she's still with me. She's still rocking it.
So you have like literally the most A player on your team that you can possibly have. Such a huge blessing. So what did she do for your practice? Like, what are some things that, like, if you could create an ideal hygienist that's also a consultant and understands everything, like, what are the things that she did different that you saw that your last hygienist did not do at all?
So things, as I look for a new hygienist, things that she's taught me to look for. She is extremely high energy.
Okay.
And she is very personal with the patients. She gets to know them really well. But the whole time she keeps them in the chair, she is educating. Hey, she'll talk about something personal, and then she'll say, hey, I see this crack in this tooth. You've got this old silver filling. Do you know how that happens? Do you know how those cracks get there? Do you know what that means? Long term, have you had any pain yet? She knows how to use those keywords like yet, because we all know, we've all seen it happen.
Yeah.
Those cracks go long enough and they will be a yet. She uses intraoral camera.
Nice.
She also did a great job of keeping me away from talking about money. I love to give things away for free because I feel guilty. I came from a poor family. I don't like people paying for things. And she told me to just stop.
She said, this is not your strong suit. Just get away.
Yep. So she tells me today, Dr. Baker is not allowed to say the D word, discount. So she recognized the weaknesses in our practice, and she said, they will schedule and they will pay because they see value in it. We created value for them. And that was a huge piece for me, remembering that I'm not taking their money. I'm creating value for them. So she shifted my own mind frame, my mindset, and she helped the patients too. And patients love her. She's also super meticulous. The girl won't leave a spot of calculus behind. And if she can't get it, she makes me come in and get it.
Nice.
Takes a lot of pride in her work, and she's extremely gentle. The previous hygienist apparently wasn't, and the patients have said, wow, that didn't even hurt.
It's amazing. Like when people can see what they're doing. Sorry, maybe I've said too much. Just, hygienists can be night and day difference. Even like at our Army dental clinic, we had one at Fort Hood downstairs that just everyone knew, like, she was going to beat you up. Like, it was rough. So not hiring that hygienist is what you'd recommend.
Yeah. I would look for a consultant any day. Or someone who can roll with you and, get you going. Ironically, she and the British guy are like brother and sister. They're usually fighting, but just in pretend. But they really keep each other on their toes.
Yeah.
They'll play Pandora stations that the other one doesn't like on purpose.
And I've heard that your patients like your British front desk.
He is the VIP of the practice.
Okay.
When patients come, if he's not here, they're upset. They don't care if I'm here.
What was his name? Simon? I think it was Simon.
Yeah, classic British guy, right? If you could ever get a British guy who has a good sense of humor up front, I highly recommend it.
See, you're just making people jealous because there's no way that people are going to be able to hire a hygienist who is a consultant and not have to pay them an arm and a leg, which I'm sure you paid a little bit more, but it sounds like she was worth every penny.
Oh, yeah.
And then a British front desk guy to just keep patients wanting to hear his voice and call in and talk with him.
It's true. And then my assistant's just like Beyonce. So I've got the most versatile group of staff ever.
That's awesome. So you went from some troubled staff, to say the least, that we can't legally mention all of the trouble that they caused you and have been through themselves personally, to a superstar team that's helping you grow this practice.
It's true. Yep.
So hiring makes a huge difference, and sometimes you just are lucky, and sometimes you aren't. And doing background checks and being patient and jumping on opportunities is what you got to do, I guess.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So then at this point, how did you grow your practice? How did you take this jumpstart practice from, doing nothing or 150,000 to where you are today?
So the first thing I want to squash is that disbelief that when they say when you come into a practice, like, don't make too many changes, you'll startle the patient. Well, I made absolutely every single change you can imagine. I put huge TVs in the room. I put computers. Everything's digital. We have music, carpeting, flooring, chairs, everything changed. Staff. And my patients have told me over and over and over again, we appreciate so much how much you've put into this practice. I have two theories on that. One is patients do care. They know that technology is out there, and if we're not using it, they're getting ripped off. The other theory I have is if you buy a practice that only has 150 patients left, they might be the nicest 150 people you ever meet because they weren't willing to leave because they were nice. So I'm not sure which one it is, but those people appreciated the change and they referred their family. I know one patient, for instance, I have a tendency to say, how you doing? Ask how you're doing through an appointment. Just make sure you're not feeling anything. Yeah. He went home and told his wife and his daughter and his son, hey, she actually asks how you're doing during the appointment. And so little things, we forget what little things make a difference in somebody's world. And so that turned into 3 more patients, which turned into more referrals because they referred more people. So just that internal growth of just the TLC. Yeah. And I used a marketing company. We put out mailers. Okay. We sent 14,000 mailers out twice. Nice. Repeated to the same homes twice. And that got us a good influx of new patients. I did start a new website. So I do think getting somebody who knows an SEO and how that works, getting you up organically, that matters. It's going to take time. So if I were to start over again, I probably would have started my website before I opened, instead of after. And then friends and family, that always helps. Neighbors, just kind of the one thing I've learned is it doesn't hurt to put yourself out there. It doesn't hurt to ask, people. Yeah. Sometimes people want to come to you, but they are not sure if they're violating a friendship. And so because everybody's personalities are different. So one thing I've learned, and I didn't learn it right away, is put your stuff out there. Hey, we welcome all people. Love to see you. Give us a call. And do it repeatedly, because sometimes they're waiting for the third time they see it to call. And if you only do it twice, they're not going to call you.
And with the mailer, mailers are a classic example of that. I think sometimes people can think like, oh, sending a mailer to the same people doesn't make sense. They already got that. But what you realize is half the people didn't even see it the first time. The other half saw it and thought it was a good idea, but didn't take any action. And so that reminder, that second touch, that third touch, it's always a good thing. And actually is more effective if you do it repeatedly to the same group, to the same homes. And it feels like a big investment, but that's where it pays off.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
It's interesting and a little frightening to think about the time, energy, and money we all spend at dental school. Because for all that effort teaching us how to do dentistry, universities rarely show us how to be dentists. And even as associates, we're so focused on improving and producing that we may not forget how a real sense of how a practice operates. Or we're thrown into a practice that operates so poorly we end up developing some extremely bad habits without even realizing it. And sometimes what you don't know can really hurt you. 20 years ago, Dr. David Ahern founded Design Ergonomics, one of our sponsors, because he was being hurt by habits developed in school and as an associate. Through exhaustive work motion studies, he learned where the literal pain points were coming from. He designed a better method of dental delivering to address them, now referred to by the ADA as over the head. This new system and his patented workstations did more than relieve his wrist, neck, and back pain. They opened his mind to a whole new way of looking at a dental practice. Today, Design Ergonomics designs, equips, and trains the nation's most productive practices. They approach design from an efficiency-driven, whole practice perspective, particularly useful to young dentists. Not only are their designs more cost-effective to build, but their systems reduce waste in inventory, overhead, and labor. Learning these concepts now, before inefficient habits can take hold, can be a real game changer for your long-term career. To learn more about design ergonomics and how they can create an affordable, efficient, and profitable practice, go to www.desergo.com. For a limited time, Design Ergonomics has made Dr. Ahern's Guide to Maximizing Productivity available to our listeners at the reduced price of $99, more than 50% savings. This guide covers core principles and provides specific tools for a practice organization. Enter promo code PODCASTGUIDE in the contact page to receive the discount. Again, that's www.desergo.com and use the promo code PODCASTGUIDE to claim your guide at a heavy discount today.
To go back to this idea of you had time as an associate and now you're an owner, talk to me about, you were talking on this Facebook post about the advantages and the pros of ownership. Obviously, this is not an easy journey that you've been through, and you've put a lot of time and effort and tears into your practice. I don't know if you've actually cried about your practice, but
probably
maybe, I don't know. But it was a lot of work, lifestyle wise, freedom wise, financial. Is there a big difference between where you are now and where you were as an associate? Because that's kind of what this guy was asking, and he was trying to have some ammunition to take back to, I think it was his, I swear it was his mother-in-law. I can't remember the exact post.
That too.
Yeah.
Yes. So my comment to him was sometimes taking out new debt is what helps destroy old debt.
Yes.
And then I wasn't so much concerned about how much debt he does or does not have. I was more concerned about his clinical and leadership skills that he does or does not have.
Cool.
You start a practice and you don't have leadership skills. You should probably check yourself, because you have to be a good leader. You don't have to, but if you want to do it right, you should be a good leader, which we can talk about in a little bit. But as far as debt, I'd been chipping away at my student loans. I was lucky enough to graduate with about $180,000 in student loans in 2009.
Okay.
And I was still chipping away at them as a non-owner, just as an associate with whatever I was making. When I took on this practice, it was a huge liability.
Yeah.
And I was, I went in, I didn't pay I had no income for the first 5 months, which is tough.
Yeah.
Coming on the heels of being off of work for almost a year.
Sure.
And then things turned. We talked about the numbers. What the practice was doing, 160 or 170,000 in a year. Our first full year, we did 600,000 collections.
Okay.
So, and so our numbers, those are numbers that I never dealt with before. And so, if you do it right, and if you are a leader, and if you are clinically sound, you will make far more, and you can crush that debt. But don't take it out until you're ready.
Right.
So I'm never concerned about the numbers. If you want to take out a $2 million loan, that's great. You need to have the skills to be able to handle that and what that means. So that would be my advice.
Awesome advice. No, I love the way that you package that, and that idea of taking out new debt to tackle old debt. Like that's, it's so hard for people who've been very like Dave Ramsey inculcated and, are just bad debt, but is often the leverage that gets people there so much faster. I loved what you said about leadership skills and clinical skills. So I think one of the problems that people have is like everyone thinks they're a good leader until they have to be a leader. And so it's hard to know that as an associate, because like as an associate, you go and, you've got maybe your small team within the practice and you see your patients, you go back to your office, but you don't really have to make the hard calls and make the decisions. So for you, did you feel like you had those leadership skills going into the practice, or do you feel like you had to develop them? And what did you do to develop those skills?
Well, I thought I had them.
Sure.
And I've certainly grown a lot in the last 2 years, having to hire people, just scenarios, dealing with whether it be conflict in opinions or whatever it may be. Whether
Simon wants to play his playlist or your hygienist wants to play hers, it's a constant struggle.
Right. Absolutely. And so, I had to run into how good am I, how effective am I at communicating and inspiring? So to go back to, as far as associate and owner real quick, one of the scenarios I was explaining to my husband one day, I said, I feel like when you're a business owner, you're a prisoner. Like you're an absolute prisoner. However, you're also the warden. You get to call all the shots, but you also take all the punishments. When you're an associate, you get to be a worker of the prison. You don't have to carry the burden of everything else, and you don't have to stay locked away in the prison. So it's, looking at it from that perspective, like, are you willing to be a prisoner?
Sure.
And the warden, or do you want to stay an employee and roll out? Because prisoners don't get to roll out.
Yeah.
That's and then to go back, if you're the warden, you have to have leadership skills. I was really lucky that I'm very personable. So I had that already.
I agree, by the way. It's obvious on the show. So anyways, keep going.
Thank you. I love building good relationships. But one of the things I would ask myself, if I'd ask myself again, how do I react under stress? That's the biggest one. When stress comes down, what is your knee-jerk reaction? If somebody comes at you, what's your knee-jerk reaction?
Yeah.
Because that's going to tell you what kind of leader you are. I often was more of an emotional leader, right? I might take things personal. I was very lucky to have taken a course called Next Level Trainings. Came across it through my son's nurse, and she just nagged at me until I took it. And it's an emotional intelligence training course. It's a transformational course.
So is this dental related at all?
Not dental related. This is life related.
Okay.
You take this course?
And
Go ahead.
real quick, one thought I know I'm going to lose if we go into this, because I'm excited about your course that you're going to talk about. One thing that it made me think of is it's kind of like being a parent, in that, like, your kids, you can say and whatever you want to say, but when you're stressed and when things hit the fan, as a parent, like, your knee-jerk reaction comes out, and they see that. It's the same thing as a practice owner, because stuff is going to go wrong and your employees are going to see how you handle those critical moments. And that's where that leadership comes out. And that's where it's like hardest to have that composure and wisdom and emotional intelligence, because everything's compressed and stressful all in the moment. So I don't know why, like, parenting and practice ownership just connected in my mind as you said that. So I don't know if that analogy makes sense.
Yeah. I say all the time, I have 3 kids at home and 6 at work.
Oh.
So I think it's a perfect analogy.
Back to the next level training.
So I popped into this course. It was about $400 or $500 for a 3-day, very intense, 12 hours a day course.
Which, so I also have to make another side comment here. I love courses for non-dentists that are, like, really awesome, because they don't have the dentist upcharge on them. So if you'd done like a 3 or 4 day, dental course, it would be significantly more. Yeah.
Yeah. So $500, 3 days. And I went in like the walking middle finger, had my arms crossed. I was like, I don't need you here.
I'm above this.
Above this. You're with everybody. There's 18-year-olds there. There's 65-year-olds there. There's drug addicts there. There's successful CEOs. Everybody's there with you. And so I'm sitting and I'm listening to the course, and I'm introduced to this guy named Chris Lee. He's our trainer, and he's talking about how he's a life coach for celebrities like Lewis Howes. And he talks, he starts giving you some information just about your body language, your presence, the experience people have of you. And I had my arms crossed. My body language was, and he stared right at me and said, and I had my head tilted to the right. And he said, if you're sitting there with your head tilted, and I just tilted my head to the left.
You were having none of it. You just did not, you're like, no, I don't buy it.
I was not, I didn't think I was going to get anything out of this. We've all taken CE courses and you're like, I can't get that time back,
Oh yeah.
Had other ones that are powerful, but this, I went in that this was not going to be powerful. I also thought it was going to be a cult, so I was really angry.
Who convinced you to do this?
My son's nurse. She just kept nagging me, and so I only did it because 2 of my staff decided to do it with me. So
okay.
we were agreeance that we'd all walk out together if it was a cult, and it's a real thing. So so we did the 3 days, and it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we rolled in on Monday, and I'm telling you, the world look different.
Hmm.
It's a different experience for everybody. I can't really say, what one person would get out of it, but it takes away that victim mode. It takes away all those weaknesses that you have, whether you're arrogant or you're insecure or you're a avoider. It helps you identify those, they're called rackets, helps you identify those and learn how to get rid of them so that you can be you.
So, it sounds like everyone kind of gets different things out of it. For you, if you don't mind sharing, like, what were some of the weaknesses that you saw in yourself that you felt like you understood better by the end of this? Which is a very personal question, so I apologize if you're like, oh, that's too much.
No, mine was, I'm very confident on the outside, but I put up a lot of walls.
Okay.
I protect myself from the world. I've had a lot of damaging things done as a child.
Okay.
And I succeed to overcome, but I don't truly connect sometimes. So I lack connection. And I was insecure. And so I lacked some of the confidence in certain areas of my life. And so that was some of the personal stuff that I had to, and also quit holding everybody to high standard in the world, right? I hold myself to high. We're dentists, we're really bad at this, but we hold high standards, and that sometimes destroys a relationship before it can start. The biggest thing I learned going through these trainings is that it is far more powerful to inspire than it is to lead with an iron fist. Nobody wants to work for somebody who leads with an iron fist, especially in women dentists. We have this insecurity about us that maybe it's created from society or within ourselves or whatever it is. Have this notion that, how dare she? I am the ruler of my kingdom. And I learned that that's extremely ineffective. Martin Luther King is my favorite example. Without internet, he got 1 million people to show up to march. 1 billion people.
That's amazing.
Can you do that nowadays with internet? How did he do it? He inspired people. He made them feel the desire to want to do that and make a difference. And so I've taken that piece and I've tried to put that into my staff. My one staff was having some hard times, and she said, I feel like I'm living your dream. And she is. She's making my dream wonderful.
It seems like this is kind of a dangerous training to take your team to.
Yeah, it is. As some of them are like, I want to be a life coach. I'm like, how about let's just settle down for a second.
You're like, no, like come back. Like we're leading this dental practice. We're not leading. But it sounds like when you're going to go through a transformational course like this, that some of those transformations are kind of deeper than your surface level job at the moment.
And they teach you, where you are, you don't need to be stagnant in life. And so the way that we handle it here is, talk to the staff. What is your dream? And how can I help you get there? Because I will not hold you back. And if this is not your dream, frankly, I don't want you to be here. Not because I don't love you.
Yeah.
But I need you to pursue what makes you happy as much as I need to pursue what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And so we've really been able to, my one hygienist wants to do some training and coaching with this program. And so we've added in another hygienist, and we've been able to adjust her schedule so she can do some of the coaching and training. So that's fulfilling her dream. Yeah. So it's really led me to realize that you have to not hold your staff back, right? We have to make them better people, which sometimes hurts us in the long run, but it'll never break us. It'll never break us. And just inspire. And my staff come in smiling. We're ready to roll.
That's awesome. One of the things that you said, because I talked about how our next season here that we're doing is on case acceptance. And, you talked about how this course helped you, even though it's not a dental related course. It's not about presenting treatment. It's not about, maximizing hygiene or anything like that. But it helped you to communicate to patients that you care about them. And so that instead of them looking at you as, are you trying to sell me something? You're actually looking at them as, do you actually care about me? And your patients can sense that you do care about them. So do you feel like you had a greater capacity to care about others because of this course?
I think I had an advantage that I was like that before the course.
Sure.
But I think that I was able to be aware of my presence and aware of how others experience me. So if I'm in a room, is this patient going to perceive me as arrogant? Are they going to perceive me as greedy? Are they going to perceive me as inconfident? or lacking confidence. And so I'm a little more self-aware of how I show up.
Okay.
And how you show up to different personalities. You may show up the same way, but different personalities will perceive it differently. And so that helped me really learn to focus in on how that patient is and how we need to approach it. And so I think it's been great. Just the way that we feel inside really reflects on the outside.
And this is stuff that, like, it's so hard to sometimes see the value of this if you haven't been through a course like this, because you're just like, really, like, is this gonna benefit me or my staff or my life at all? And it ends up being what makes all of this stuff worth it, and it increases your profitability and the culture of your team. This is the kind of stuff that's hard to do as a leader. It's hard to have this kind of culture, and it's cool that you shared this experience with your team. And it sounds like you've shared it with some more people. I can't remember how many people you've told me.
Yeah, there's on one of the groups, Mommy Dentist in Business, there's 5 of us now that have taken it kind of across the United States. So we kind of have our own little powerful group going, which is pretty cool. A little support group. It's all about, the end of the day, finding your silver lining. And that was the other piece that I learned from it was, if you walk outside and your tires, somebody steals the tires off your car, you're like, yes, I don't have to buy another car. I don't have to go car shopping. I hate car shopping. I just have to go get new tires, So finding that silver lining of what is good, your schedule fell apart. Yes. Now we have time to train staff. Now I have time to do all those bills I didn't have time before. And those, the ops really need a good scrub anyway. Finding that shifting is one of the words. Shift your mindset. Get out of anger. Get out of pity. Get out of all that stuff. And if you can do that, then your staff can too. But if you can't, forget about it. You're going to have angry staff. You're going to have bitterness, drama. You're going to have all those toxic things floating in your office. And usually you're not even going to know it's there.
No, absolutely. Well, we're running out of time of, we kind of try and keep it at about an hour, but this was awesome. This was really cool to hear your experience and your transition into practice ownership and how you made that work despite it being not ideal from the beginning. You made it what you want it to be, and you've created those systems. You've brought on those team members, and within a very short period of time took your jumpstart into a profitable practice. And now you're taking it to the next level with leadership skills and other things. So this, remind me one more time, because maybe people weren't paying attention at first. What was the name of that course and the guy who taught it for our listeners?
Yes. So the course is called nextleveltrainings.com is the website. There's 3 courses. The first one's called Discovery. I've done the first and the second. I've not done the third. And my personal trainer in that class was Chris Lee, who is amazing. Check him out. He's on Lewis Howes's podcast.
And I love Lewis Howe. There's a direct quote from Lewis Howe of that I've captured that encapsulate the whole reason we're doing our next season as the next season is basically that the first skill you need to have as a business owner is that you need to learn how to sell. And as in dentistry, we cringe at that word, but the way he says it just blows my mind. So I love Lewis Howe. I love that Chris Lee trained him. And I think we're going to try and get Chris Lee on the show, and maybe Lewis Howe someday. We'll see. I don't know. He's kind of too big now. We'll see if we can get him on.
Nothing. We can move mountains. We'll be fine.
Nice.
I love it. So nextleveltrainings.com. It's owned and Chris Lee's not always the trainer.
Okay.
I was really lucky to have him as my trainer, but there's amazing trainers. And they have 2 locations, one in Columbus, Ohio, and one in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Cool.
And then there's some other programs that are similar. This Next Level Trainings is based off of one that was in California. I don't know the name of it. I'm sorry. But they're out there.
Okay.
They're pretty cool.
That's
programs.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have links to that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Dawn. This was a delight. I loved your stories. Thank you for sharing with us.
Gosh, thank you so much. I hope somebody learned something, and I can't wait to learn from everybody else.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Dawn is on a lot of the Facebook groups. If you want to reach out to her, what's the best way if someone wanted to thank you for your interview or ask you a question, what would be the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So you can find me on Facebook. It's under Dawn Cheney. It's Cheney.
Okay.
Baker, Baker, or you can email me. My email address is dawn, DAWN, .baker.dds@gmail.com.
Awesome. And we'll get that in the show notes too, so anyone can reach out to you if they want to. So thank you so much. We will talk with you later, okay?
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay, George, what did you think about that journey? I feel like it's a little different than the ones we've had before.
Yeah, and I'm very, very happy we had her on and had this perspective on our show. I think I really enjoyed her perspective. And I think for most of our audience who knows, my situation, might think that I don't agree with a lot of the things she said. But it's almost the opposite. I think 95% of what she said I was totally on board with. And I think in my situation, being in ownership early in my career, I learned the good and bad that comes with that. And I think one of the major downsides in my situation is clinical development. And I feel like you guys touched on that. And I think just being comfortable being a dentist and being comfortable with yourself clinically is like super invaluable. And I really appreciated that perspective that she offered.
Absolutely. And I feel like we are always banging the early ownership drum of just like, it's like an ideal that we hold up. But everyone has their own journey and there's good sides to both sides of it. And sometimes people can get fixated on like one thing, like everyone should be an early owner or everyone should do GPRs or everyone should wait 6 years, so it's like everyone's got their own journey. And I thought her Jumpstart experience, it played out like we explain the pros and cons of that. It's like if you treat this like a startup that has some equipment and a shell and some charts, but no systems, no reliable team, you're going to have to build this internally from scratch. But she bought in for super cheap. So I thought it was it fit with what we've said in the past. And she showed how you can turn that into something good.
Yeah. And, I agree with everything you said. And I agree that she did a great job. If somebody had sent me an email with that same opportunity,
yeah,
I wouldn't, I mean, she did a great job. I would not have told them to do it. You know what I mean?
I would tell them, go listen to this episode and realize this is, a year and a half later where she's got time and space from it and how painfully she described the experience even now. So it would be one of those things that you just can't prepare for how difficult and maybe even dark some of those days are going to be when you're first starting up and you've got so little set up for you and you have to do everything. And you're fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, and I don't think, I think in the top 3 order is, buy the right practice, do a startup that's done, with, intention and thought in every step, and then, hanging on to a great associateship. I still think those are the way I'd rank 3 great options. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think a Jumpstart is in any of those 3. And I think people can sometimes get so attracted to the purchase price of a Jumpstart opportunity. We call it Restart in the accelerator, but I don't view them in high regard. And I think her interview justified why I don't, even though she was successful and is successful.
No, absolutely. I also loved, not only was she just a phenomenal interview, I really enjoyed her perspective on leadership skills. And, she looked for a non-dental source for those leadership skills. And I think that's great. I think that's totally appropriate. And if you find someone that you click with, then you really should go with that and develop your team and develop yourself. I thought she had some awesome piece of advice for us on those leadership skills.
Oh, yeah. And I think listening to her, maybe it's different because I can relate to a lot of the things that she was talking about, but I felt like her perspective, mindset, and leadership, like the way she spoke, it just seemed very healthy to me. It seems like she's in a very good mindset, and I think that has a lot to do with her ability to lead a team that, wouldn't seem like an easy team to lead.
Yeah. Well, and I also think the very specific advice to hire a male British front desk team member, I think that was the true gem. Like everyone should go out and just find a Simon and hire someone like that to run your front desk. It's going to work for you.
Oh my goodness. Can I offer, I feel like there's been, especially on Facebook, so much talk about like GPRs and, buying practice out of school and all this stuff. I feel like my whole opinion on it is, I feel like when you enter ownership, you're very clinically like stale. You know what I mean? Like I feel like clinical growth slows down substantially. Because you're more focused on other things and you have, production, what you're very busy with everything else. It's just not a big focus.
Yeah.
And so I talked to Paul about this, who's kind of the big GPR cheerleader. And, I felt like if you're comfortable with where you're at clinically and you're not planning on a lot of growth, then, I think that debates when you go into ownership. I feel like that's how I would make that gauge if I'm someone out there. What are your thoughts on that type of perspective?
I am really happy that all of these debates have happened, including some of the ones that were difficult to bear through, because I've finally clarified my thinking on AEGD and GPR. In my mind, if you know that if you were financially independent, you would still practice dentistry. So say that you're like, okay, I have however many $1 million could set me up for the rest of my life, but I would still like to do dentistry 1 or 2 days a week just because I love dentistry. And a GPR or AEGD is what you would need to do or would make you more comfortable with the type of dentistry that you want to do, then I think you should absolutely do it, no question. If dentistry is not in the picture in your ideal retirement situation, if you would, just want to walk away as soon as possible, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to go do an AEGD or GPR and further that side of your skill set. Because I think you can build up a business and do things right and have a good, healthy practice. But in my mind, that perspective clarifies that question for me, whether someone should or shouldn't.
I've never thought about it that way, to be honest. That's interesting. That is very interesting. I think. Go ahead.
And for me, like that was there was literally a moment where it's really random. We were sitting in the prenatal class at the hospital where we were going to have our first baby. And the nurse there said, I've been doing this for 30 years. And it just like set in at that moment, like, oh, I really want to do the kind of dentistry that I enjoy. And even if it takes 2 extra years and I make less money in the meantime, which I am, like sitting here watching all of you buy practices and own and crush it, like I am making less money than I could if I got out of the Army sooner, if I didn't do my residency. But right now, I'm so happy with the clinical dentistry that I'm doing and that I'm comfortable doing complex endo under a scope and doing retreats and all these things that I'm getting to do right now that I wouldn't have done had I skipped that residency. And that's just for me in my circumstance. But I think that question helps me recommend or not recommend that to others.
I really like that question. Yeah, I think that, I think that's a great way of looking at it. I think we should drop that conversation as is because I think that's a great perspective. Cool. The only other thing I wanted to add is she talked about making changes kind of early in ownership. I think both episodes, both her and Megan, talked about making changes early in ownership. And I think your ability to be a leader and to, like she had been talking about, have your staff understand, get them motivated to do whatever your vision is it probably will dictate your ability to make changes slow or fast. I think that would be, so I think it's such a valuable skill to have because she can walk in somewhere and, do things the way she wants to, knowing that she has her leadership skills to kind of, help her make that happen and facilitate that change.
Absolutely. And then overlay that with what we talked about on your episode where, the things that the staff wants to change and that are easy to change and that are of high value. It's like combine leadership with like, what is the low hanging fruit of like, this is obvious in my mind. We need to change this. The team's on board. Let's make it happen. I think that's where you start. And sometimes it's hard to know that though. If there's so many things, if you lose that perspective, you can be overwhelmed by all the changes you could or want to make.
And last thing I'll add, because you talked about it, is I think a great leader, part of that is listening and being able to ask questions to your staff to incite those answers. Because you're never going to walk into a place and those questions, the answers to those are never going to be obvious. But being a good leader, I think, is asking those questions, figuring out those answers from your team, and then using that information to work towards your vision and goal. And so I think that is very much part of the leadership, is understanding what your team wants from the practice as well.
Absolutely. No, totally. Well, this was fun. I loved these 2 episodes. We're going to have a few more. I think the goal is early October is when we're going to launch our season 4. So I think we're going to have a few more of these pre-ownership flashbacks, and then we're going to get into pretty intensely case acceptance. I'm excited. I've already done some interviews, and they're turning out really, really good. It's going to be an awesome season. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk with you next week on the Shared Practices podcast.
The metrics that matter most, brought to you by Practice by Numbers. As an owner, manager, and producer, you have a lot on your mind, to say the least. Most of us were not trained to run a business, so we piece it together the best we can. Understanding a few key metrics in your practice is a first step to finding success in your business. Success is always a measure from some starting point. Practice by Numbers dashboard analytics software provides a simple way for you to track the metrics that matter most. With this in mind, today we will explore hygiene pre-appointment rate. Improvements to this metric add efficiency and productivity to your practice. When this number is low, you waste resources tracking down patients to fill your chairs, and ultimately you lose some patients. Many practices only pre-appoint about 50 to 60% of the hygiene recall patients, while 90% is very achievable. Follow these steps to help your team achieve 90 to 95% pre-booking. It all starts with awareness. Where are you now? Look at your hygiene pre-appointment rate for the previous year and then month. Make your team aware of this metric and commit as a team to achieving 90% pre-booking. At your daily huddle, review yesterday's pre-booking rate and commit to calling anyone not appointed to schedule them now while it's fresh in their minds. Help team members with verbal skills to aid them in appointing the reluctant patients that they might encounter. Set your reminder system to give patients 2 weeks notice before an appointment so they can feel comfortable appointing, knowing that they can call to adjust their appointment if they discover they have a conflict. To learn more about using smart data to manage your business, visit practicebynumbers.com.